John Thurston, next to John, Mike Hodder. And then to my left, Vaughn Dugan, who is the Vice Chairman of the Planning Board. Next to Vaughn, Susan Replier, Planning Board member. Matt Sullivan, Planning Director. And Kathy Lapierre, who will be taking minutes this evening. We have several public hearings. Let me quickly go through the format for this evening. Actually, the first item is a continued one, and so we'll get to that item in just a moment. But what happens is I read the item into the record. The applicant then has an opportunity to explain the application and how it conforms with the particular zoning regulations or zoning ordinance. Our planning director will offer some comments. If he feels that it's necessary, planning board members can ask questions. We then, in some cases, need to determine if waivers need to be granted. If they need to be granted, the applicant has to explain to us why we would grant a waiver. We would then vote on that item, and then if an application is complete, we will vote to accept the application as complete. And at that point in time, I can then open the public hearing. Any member of the public that wants to comment, ask a question, make comments, that would be the time for you to do that. We then have more opportunity for questions and by the planning board members and any discussion that's necessary. Usually we try to complete an application in one meeting. Sometimes that's not the case. As you'll hear in just a minute, the first application, we asked the applicant to go back and get some additional information and did not make a decision. So anyway, that's the format. And let me read the first item into the record. As I said, this was continued from March 5th, 2019. Sonia and Kim Lemire, this is 9 Fairway, this for a special use permit, tax map 243-60, case 2019-05. And we asked the applicant to consider some other alternatives that had come up at our last hearing. And so I believe that that's what's going to occur.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Peter Cooperdock here. I am here with the additional information that was requested. I have some plans and some information I'd like to pass out to the board.
We can share one.
Okay, I first handed out the revised plan itself. Now I'm going to hand out sheets of alternatives that were requested.
Okay. Before? Okay. Could these items have been available prior to the meeting tonight? I mean, it's kind of difficult for us we try to be prepared as much as possible. And then we're given things and you're talking, we're trying to look and see what you're talking about, and it's,
Well, I suppose I could have done this one. I can easily explain it. I don't think it's that complicated
Okay.
to follow.
okay, it's so much easier if we can get things ahead of time so that, because we all spend time looking at the items that are submitted, so.
Okay, well, sorry about that. This alternatives analysis was based on the information that was requested last time. The original is shown on here as red, which was the proposal from last time. The planning board had a recommendation to look at a shorter potential driveway, and that's the alternative listed as PB. And then the current proposal that what I'm presenting tonight is in the brown. We're listed as current. The numbers associated with it are the square footage of impact. The first number being the square footage of impact to actual wetland area, including the stream channel. The second number being the impact to the buffer zone, the 25-foot buffer zone on either side of the wetland. You'll note that the original was 400 square feet of impact to the wetland and stream channel, with 2,820 square feet of buffer zone impact. The planning board requested alternative was 553 square feet of wetland impact, a greater impact to the wetland, but a reduction in the square footage of the buffer zone, the 25-foot buffer zone surrounding the wetland. The current proposal has retained the permitted by the Wetlands Bureau crossing, has not changed that, so it remains at 400 square feet of wetland impact. But by moving it out of the buffer zone as much as reasonably possible, the impact is now at 1,925 square feet of buffer zone. So we are proposing that be the proposal presented tonight. Now this uses the same originally permitted wetland crossing, so there would be no need to go to the state for any revision of wetland impact, because it is the same wetland impact. I discussed this. I thought last time it was a reasonable request, and since this proposal was first presented in 2004, and I had gone through this analysis at that time, it was all very clear to me that what I was proposing was a good idea, but it didn't quite come across to you as a great deal of time has passed. So I re-examined the alternatives based on the request and discussed it with the landowner. She is much more interested in maintaining the proposed crossing of the wetland due to the fact that you'll see the house as you drive into the property, as opposed to just seeing the garage. That isn't her interest. She certainly understands that it was a reasonable request on the board's part to look at it, but with driving into the property, she'd much rather just see the house, not just the doors of the garage. So we have moved the driveway out of the buffer zone as much as reasonably possible. It just adds a little more of a curve to the driveway. It gets closer to the abutter, which is something I was hoping to avoid, but it does reduce the buffer zone impact. And on the proposal itself, it's still maintaining the grass strip on the wetland side of the of the driveway. And there was some discussion last time about the functionality of the grass strip and concern that it was just going to turn into a barren area with a blade of grass here and there. I find that somewhat difficult to believe that someone would let a property such as this not maintain the grass strip, and it is a stipulation of anything you approve to maintain that. So I'm quite confident that anybody that develops this property is going to maintain it in a way that is attractive and suitable for the neighborhood. I feel this grass strip will be an enhancement to the property, as well as a protection for sediment and anything coming off the driveway, to protect the wetland in that way. This has also extended the stone walls going across the wetland area into the buffer zone to ensure the grading. This plan has, you had requested a grading plan of the property. Generally, it was a two-foot contours. Before, I have added a intermediate contour as it crossed the wetland to give a clear understanding of the height of this crossing, and have added the inverts and of the culvert itself, inlet and outlet, to clearly display the fact that this is going to have with a 2-foot culvert, it's going to have a 2-foot cover. That's the intent, that it'll have a 2-foot cover, and there'll be a good stone wall retaining area to minimize the extent of impact through the wetland and in the buffer zone by having a sturdy wall on both sides. The question came up last time about the functions of this wetland, and the fact that this ditch was dug through it pretty much destroyed most of the functions that the wetland would have had to a great deal, because it's lowered or eliminated the ability of water to be treated as it flowed through a formerly vegetated area, though there is still some that goes on from the sides of the wetland. But as far as passing through, it just goes through now. The one thing that it does seem to do, and this is a function more of the existing culvert through the cul-de-sac, is that it seems to back up to some extent in storm events areas, forming some kind of flood flow backup alteration, retaining some of the runoff in this area. And this second culvert with the actual driveway would also be functioning at that. In discussion with an engineer to talk about it, we were unable to get the drainage calculations completed for tonight, but as preliminary look at it is in a 50-year storm, this would not be adequate to pass through all of the flow from the hillside, but that having a 2-foot cover over it would allow for there be a retention of some of that runoff behind, and retain it to some extent, and allow it to be reducing the impact downstream. I also talked to Dave Ford, the town engineer, public works director, and he is of similar thinking along that lines, that it would be good to have as much ways to hold back the water as it's going down slope into, because this eventually goes across the cul-de-sac into a large wetland, flows, and ultimately, of course, gets to the lake.
Matt, did you have a chance to talk to Dave?
By the time we got done with our meeting, Dave was actually gone. I didn't have a chance to connect with him. The question was, Peter, and you may have talked to Dave about this. Do you recall when the drainage is scheduled to be upgraded on this road. Dave had discussed it with me, but I couldn't remember when Kathy had asked
But
me
he's
today.
hoping to do it this year.
Okay.
That is.
Yeah,
what he's-
I knew it was soon, but
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if it was this
that
year or
is it.
next.
But he's going to be using the same, just replacing what's there. He's not increasing the diameter
Right.
of it. He's going to replace it with another 18-inch culvert. So another question that came up was the foundation drain, what happens with that, and whether there is going to be one. There is, and if there's going to be a basement, and there is. Planned on a basement. I didn't have the information at that time. So what I've proposed is a dry well off for the foundation drain, that anything that comes into the drip edge, everything that goes through a drip edge gets slowed down. One of the biggest points of any of these is not to eliminate the water, but to slow it down to get it out of the peak runoff phase. So anything that goes through the drip edge will slow as it infiltrates through the sand that is above it, above the foundation drain. And then there was concern about it outletting directly into the stream. So I've proposed very clearly here a dry well. It's in the buffer zone, and I have accounted for the square footage of the temporary impact to install that there, but that would be another reduction in peak flow for the storm event. Okay, so.
Okay, questions? Planning board members? John, there's a proposed grass strip along that driveway. Would it be better to have some other type of plantings there to sort of absorb the water?
My original concern was that a grass strip would need fertilizer in order for it to maintain and grow, and that's what I'm projecting in that area. But you moved it back. I'm okay with that. The area where it gets closer to the brook, I was hoping that it would have a riprap embankment, because you wouldn't have to fertilize that area and you wouldn't have to make it grow, and therefore you wouldn't have as much potential as granules or whatever dribbling down that get applied and bouncing off and ending up in the brook area. That's why I mentioned that. So if you could have the riprap end about where the top of the stone wall is, and then you've moved back a little ways, so I mean, there's a happy medium there.
Okay. Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Matt, have you seen this handout before tonight?
I have not.
So you have not looked at the figures to verify whether or not the changes in disturbance?
No, but if this were to be presented prior to the meeting, Mike, I wouldn't be analyzing square footage calculations by hand.
Anyway.
Yeah, I wouldn't be doing that. I rely on the consultant or the agent to actually do that analysis.
And a question for our Vice Chairman. One, do you remember, was the PB suggestion correspond to what you suggested?
It was. I was going to go more directly through the arrow spot, make more of an S.
That's what I thought. Okay. And one question for the applicant's agent. Last time I pointed out that in your narrative you had not described the functions of the wetland, and I asked you if you would not do that when you came back tonight. You verbally described the function of the wetland, but I have nothing in writing for the file to that effect.
Well, it's in other parts of that report. You know, all of the information about the functions is in other portions of the report, not in the one that you pointed out.
Our ordinance calls for a narrative to specifically address that issue. and it's not been addressed in your original presentation, and I asked you at that time if you would not mind updating that presentation, and tonight you're here and you haven't. It's a small point, but it nonetheless is going to be in the file, and it will be looked at maybe 10 years from now, and it would have been good to have had that. And I would ask you in future if you would, in cases of missing materials that are pointed out to you, and you're going to come back and plead the case again on a continuance, if you wouldn't mind supplying those pieces of information.
Okay.
Mike, just so I understand, you're speaking to an actual wetlands report stamped by a certified wetland scientist.
No, I'm looking at the special use permit application, impact to wetlands and buffer zone that we were presented the last hearing, and it has a number of points that need to be covered. And number 2 is the functions of the wetland.
Yep.
Narrative attached describes the erosion control devices that are going to be used and says nothing about the function of the wetland. I pointed that out at the time, and I thought tonight we were going to get something in writing describing the function of the wetland, and we did not.
That is correct. Because I guess I misunderstood your intent.
I was very clear.
Okay, well,
Could you, yeah, okay. The stream, you said that this was not a perennial stream.
correct.
And how did you make that determination?
Well, there's a few different, the definition between perennial and seasonal is somewhat a vague a point. One of the points that I've come across in my research on the topic was that if it's a dug ditch, it knocks it right out of being a perennial stream. And this has been clearly a dug channel through a wetland area. So that would, on that point, would eliminate it as a perennial stream. The other point is that its watershed is around 60 acres, which the Wetlands Bureau uses 200 acres as a distinction between a Tier 1 and a Tier 2, with the assumption that that's a demarcation between seasonal and year perennial.
Okay, I'm wondering how many of the, I mean, that's a pretty heavily treed lot. So
Correct.
Are you going to be going in and clear cutting that, or?
Well, the proposal is to not have any impact within the 25 feet of the wetlands with the buffer zone, except for the crossing that's outlined on this plan. No other cutting is allowed or planned for, or any of that. Obviously, the house is going to take down a good chunk of the center portion of the property, and the builder is going to want room to maneuver for foundation purposes. And so that is going to make an impact on probably a third of the lot when you get down to it. There's not any way. There's going to be removal of trees for the construction process.
Okay,
You've outlined the silt sock area. You're not going to do anything outside of the silt sock area.
Correct. Right.
Does the silt sock area delineate the temporary impact area, Peter?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it does.
Okay. And is that area within there included in the calculations, the 1925? Or is that 1925 only the house footprint and the driveway footprint?
That's only the driveway impact of the buffer zone. That's the area outside of the buffer zone has not been
Because
calculated.
you're following right along. Okay. Yep.
okay, so basically, no alternative location outside of the wetlands. We've sort of looked at 3 locations, and basically, you're telling us that this would be the less intrusive.
Yes, this is the least impacting alternative.
Okay. And then I am trying to come to grips with C, design, construction, and maintenance methods will be such as to avoid or minimize detrimental impact upon the wetlands. I mean, are there going to be additional plantings that are ultimately going to be proposed?
Not within the buffer zone area, except for the grass strip. That's the only additional plantings that's...
Okay, and John, you're thinking that's
I would make
adequate.
I would make a recommendation that anywhere in the buffer area before the bridge on the crossing and after the bridge crossing be stone on the sides and not be grass. So all the way in, you can come all the way in, have a grass strip, and then right where the S on the curve is, that's where you stop.
And you're thinking a riprap there, John?
Okay, thank you. Okay, let me just see if there's any member of the public that wants to speak. Why don't you just...
Could I just
I'm
quickly
sorry, I'm
ask two
sorry.
questions?
Yeah, sure.
The applicant. Peter, on the plan, you show a couple things I want to ask questions about. One, the dry well cross-section, you have that at 3 feet deep. Do you feel that's adequate for the flow from the foundation drain that you've proposed?
Yeah, that's a standard outflow. Yep.
And on the detail for the drip line trench, there isn't an under drain shown, but I would assume there would be an under drain.
Well, that's the perimeter drain.
Okay,
Yes.
is there an under drain going in the drip line trench?
Just at the foundation level.
Okay.
You know, so that's 8 feet down,
Okay,
or 6 feet down.
okay.
Yep.
And lastly, if you could just address the path issue, which I know Brian has commented on as well, the
Oh,
path that
the
crosses the
existing
lot.
path,
Yep.
yes. I was requested to talk to the surveyor of the property to verify what I had found, that that there is no easement across the property. He provided a letter stating so. I provided that to Matt earlier, and he confirms that there's no easement.
And we have...
And it has been
Yes, and
changed.
you have it in your packets, I believe,
Yes.
as well. Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Back to the dry well here.
Oh, okay.
All right, you got a line that says 532, a little ways away from the dry well. Your slab elevation in the garage is 537. You said you're going 6 feet down below 537, brings you up 531. If you come back to 532, pipes down below the grade, what happens when it fills up with water? Does it back up towards the house?
The pipe isn't going to be, the slab of the house is going to be at 532.
That's the basement floor?
That's the basement floor, so that it would have a flow.
So does
So-
that dry well vent to air then? It's right at the level then, basically, what you're telling
It's
me?
like 6 inches below grade is where the inlet is going to be. Yes, there'll be a stone area in the ground that the pipe will go into, and it'll flow out of. There'll be a filter fabric around it. There'll be a cap
But
of
it's
stone on top.
it's below the grade, so
Right.
when the water fills up, the water travels up the pipe for a little ways. I mean, what's the pitch in the pipe that comes from the
Probably
house?
1% pitch. Yeah.
So Peter, just so I understand, the exit elevation of the pipe from the foundation is at what elevation?
I think it's 531, I think is what I anticipated it was going to be.
John, are you comfortable with that?
It's close.
Okay.
So I have just a visual problem with the numbers. I see the narrowest part of the seasonal stream is sort of near where you put PB suggested, the blue lines. And then, and you're saying that's 553 feet of impact. And then down here where it's wider, where you're crossing, it says 400. It just visually, I don't have a scale with me, and I didn't have this large scale plan that looks like it's much smaller.
Well, the blue lines is the edge of the driveway itself. There are additional lines on each side of that, which would actually be the extent of impact, okay, beyond the driveway itself. So you got to take in the 20-foot 20-foot width of the impact of the driveway, not just the 14-foot of the traveled way itself. So with adding that in, that gets it up to the 553.
It looks less or equal just from here.
Well, I made little figures out of AutoCAD, and
Yeah.
I calculated the areas of it, and that's what it came
I
out to be.
appreciate the fact that it's no longer in the setback, but I question the ability of somebody to navigate into the garage doors.
Well, I discussed it, I understand that concern, and I discussed it, and the landowner, that's what she wants to do. We can't really judge what people's preferences are.
Okay, let me see if there's any member of the public. Okay, the public hearing was kept open on this item. Did anyone want to speak yes, come on. Yes. Oh, okay. Okay, this is a public hearing, so we need to hear what discussion is taking place here.
As far as the impact numbers, I think it makes sense.
No.
Okay, did you want to comment on this plan? Did you want me to continue this and go on while they have a chance to look at this plan?
They're okay.
Oh, you're all set?
This is more.
Okay. Okay, planning board members, questions, comments? Is everyone all set with this? Do you want to hear some conditions that Matt has proposed?
So I've broken the conditions into two separate categories, should the board proceed with an approval. And I'm going to try to do this for future applications, so we have clear sort of steps in the process for the applicant and the property owner. The first grouping is those conditions to be met prior to the signing of the plans. First condition is a standard one, that's the following plans as amended to the date of the approval are hereby incorporated into the approval with the original stamps and signatures as applicable. In this case, that would be from a certified wetland scientist and a licensed land surveyor. And in this case, obviously, the plan that is being incorporated is Plan 1, and that is dated, revised to 3/25/2019. That's the plan you see in front of you right now. I will just note, not as a condition, but this plan that was presented showing the impact areas will also become a part of the file, just as record, just so you know. Condition number 2 is all of the documentation submitted in the application packet is obviously incorporated into the approval unless it's superseded in some way. And that's a standard condition as well. It's condition number 2. Condition 3, the applicant shall be responsible for the payment of all recording fees for the recording of the notice of decision. Condition 4, final version of the narrative letter shall be submitted, including a certified wetland scientist stamp on the letter itself. I've added a condition number 5, and that is the addition of stone riprap in the area adjacent to the driveway crossing around the wetland, and that is something that needs to be added to the plan.
With filter fabric.
With filter fabric underneath, and that shall be noted on the plan and added to the plan prior to any signature. That'll be condition number 5, and as long as the board trusts me to just favorably review that, I can take a look at that, and I can even talk to John too if you'd like. Those are the 5 conditions prior to signature. Conditions to be met prior to building permit approval or construction activity. Condition 5, the applicant shall, or Condition 6 rather, the applicant shall comply with the pre-construction siltation erosion control measures. In this case, those shown in the plan include the silt fencing. Condition 7, an inspection by the town shall be required of siltation devices prior to construction. And Condition 8, these are the wetlands boundary monumentation conditions under 175.9.1, and those include those 4 sub-conditions as noted there in the review. That's conditions 1 through 8.
And I'd just like to add a comment. If in fact the builder and client find that this driveway doesn't make sense,
Correct.
they need to come back,
Correct.
because to me it doesn't make sense, but they may find that during construction. They'll have to come back and go through this process again.
Okay, thank you. John, did you have?
Make a motion, we approve case number 2019-05, tax map lot 243-060,
Okay, with the
with
conditions.
conditions stated, please.
Okay, thank you. Motion's been made. I'm going to second.
I'll second it.
Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, 1 abstention. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, the next application is actually 2 applications. One is a special use permit, and the other is a site plan review. And so we're going to have to, I'll just read the first one into the record. We're going to need to review the special use permit application and make a decision before we go ahead with the site plan application. So the application is Sky Ridge Farm Condominium Association. This is for a special use permit, tax map 188-63, case 2019-07. And this is for 1 garage within the setback area, or the wetland setback area. This applicant went to the zoning board of adjustment last night and was granted a setback variance. And now I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. The applicant actually wishes to, I guess it does work over here, build 2 garages. There are 4 of the condominium units in what's known as the barn building that do not have garage space. One of the 2-car garages is outside of the buffer. That's not part of tonight's discussion. They do want to build 1 2-car garage down near this end of the building that is within the wetland setback, not within the wetland itself. Each of the garages are 23 by 25, and they will mirror this 4-car garage building in appearance. I do have a picture of a close-up of the existing garage showing the lighting on it that I can give to you now or later, whatever. Start with Brad and
Okay,
pass it down.
thank you.
So there are several considerations as to why we have separated this into 2 garages. One of which is a water line that comes in from the street. It ends at a standpipe in here and then travels directly up towards the side of the building. So there's not enough space to actually put 4-car garage in this area. Another consideration is the handicapped occupant of the end unit down here who is not comfortable walking to the far end of the building to access the garage. We have placed it as close to the end as to her end of the building as possible for access reasons. I know the Conservation Commission suggested that, in their view, this was not the only possible place to put the garage. I even heard somebody suggest they could put it behind the building. That would indeed be possible, but I don't view it as practical. We already have a paved driveway running across the front, and to put an additional driveway in the back of the building would only cause more impact generally.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, just a second,
Sure.
please.
Did you make that case to the Conservation Commission, the requirements for specific siting that you feel are necessary here? Did they hear that argument?
I did make that argument. I take a very hands-off approach when I'm presenting to the Conservation Commission. For obvious reasons, I don't want there to be any conflict of interest. So after I presented, I just stepped back and
No, that wasn't my
didn't take part. So
I understand you recused yourself. But my question is, the argument that you just made to us, did you make that same argument to the Concom?
I made the same argument that placing it in the front was the most practical location. Yes. We are also dealing with an aesthetic issue. The photographs that were submitted with the application shows a grove of very mature 18 to 24-inch silver maples in the front of the building, and the applicant very much wished to keep the appearance of the front of the building as such and not be cutting down these large, majestic trees. Also analyzed the Conservation's Commission's opinion that the garage could be placed over this little paved turnout. Personally, I don't see that that would really reduce impervious surface anyway. If it was placed over there, whoever is pulling into the garage or backing into the garage would need a turnout space. You'd have the same amount of impervious surface regardless. Any questions?
So despite the impervious surface issue there, you'd have to replace it with a small turnout somewhere near the maple trees. Did you consider that that location on the end where there looks to be a parking lot now would be a good location outside of the wetland setback?
Yeah, I mean, the cars could come in on the paved driveway, turn into the garage, and then back out again and leave, so it's already an impact that exists.
But this would put the garage outside of the wetland setback?
By moving it this direction?
No, by putting it over here. I mean, you've already got, it looks like relief from the side setback line. If you put a garage here and a small turnout there outside of the wetland setback, you would satisfy the special use permit issues. You wouldn't even have to have one.
I think you're still dealing with having an impervious turnaround someplace here. If you crowded it over here, you'd still have to keep it on the property. If it was any tighter in here, it would be off the property.
Also,
I don't see as it would make any difference.
if the new garage is along the property line where the current parking lot or turnout is,
You're talking over here.
yeah, and then a small turnout is created not in the wetland setback, but next to it.
There's not room.
I think because of that buffer, Vaughn, it is very difficult to actually get the garage in there because the buffer cuts that corner of the lot off there.
The
Unless you're
setback
referring to putting it to the north of that?
The setback is almost at the pavement. There's less than 5 feet there.
Okay, there was a comment in one of the documents we received saying if ZBA does not approve this variance, the only alternative would be to move this set of garages 20 feet further along the barn driveway. And where was that
That would be moving it in this direction.
Okay.
That's how I would look favorably to that, moving it 20 feet to the side. Why is it so close to the property line? Just like, and how much distance is in that back corner?
It's still walking distance for somebody who has great difficulty walking.
Is it like 5 feet?
Well, you just mentioned 20 feet, so
Well, I'm just reading
I'm
from,
asking the back corner to the property line right now.
where this, you're not talking back here by the swimming pool?
No, move up. That's right, right there.
Okay.
Is it 5 feet?
It's
It's
5.
about 5 feet, yeah.
Yep.
And that's what the ZBA waiver was for?
Correct.
okay, so if the variance had not been granted and it was moved the 20 feet, would require removing some of the trees you were trying to say?
Correct.
Okay,
Yes.
all right. Thank you. Okay, other questions? Matt, did you want to add anything before I open?
Yeah, I just note a few things. Obviously, I was, ultimately in this review, I recommended the application is not complete. However, we have received a narrative letter that I passed along to the board yesterday that I felt was a good effort towards completeness and did constitute completeness, regardless of the timeliness of it. I think it did address many of the issues in my review. Just a few remaining concerns. I think comparable to our last application, the temporary impact areas are not shown on the plan set that's proposed here. It doesn't really give a full extent of what the buffer and setback impacts are. Additionally, the erosion control is not shown on the plan, although it's indicated elsewhere that it would be installed. That's typically something we ask to be delineated. It also helps us identify what that temporary impact area is going to be, because that usually creates the boundary. And lastly, just that some details are missing. It is noted that there'll be infiltration trenches, which I think it's a good element of the development, but they aren't really clearly shown on the site, and partly that's because the scale of the plan is a little bit difficult to read. So it's a little bit challenging to see whether those details are actually on there.
Okay.
Do we have a scale requirement? I mean, this is nearly impossible.
So one of the challenges of the plans that were submitted is they are intended as, they're 24 by 36 plans that have been scaled down. So that's one of the issues. So it likely meets that requirement, but when it's scaled down to the 11 by 17 font, it's impossible to read, and we don't have a standard for 11 by 17 plans, I don't
Do
believe.
we take Xerox of the area, or Xerox is incorrect, a copy of
Yeah.
the area in question at full scale and add it to our packets?
We certainly could, and I think a better solution might be to just simply contact the applicant's agent and ask for them to do a quick blow-up for us so we can clearly see the infiltration trenches, because I think if I copy what's in here, you still won't be able to pick out that level of detail, but we can definitely do that if the board feels that's necessary to make a decision, because it is very challenging to see. I like small font, and I can't.
I don't see a problem. It's a slab garage, so the infiltration trenches are just areas where it's going to drop into the slot. There's no outlet drain or anything, so, I mean,
Yep. Yeah, the only reason I suggest it is because we typically get it on the plan. I just want sort of effort of consistency, but you're right, John, that because there's no full found here, it's not a big issue, but I just wanted to make sure I address that.
Madam Chairman,
Yes.
we have a wetlands conservation overlay district ordinance, and in the ordinance, part of its apparatus is a procedure that needs to be followed when one applies for makes an application of this sort. There are certain steps that have to be followed. The previous application failed to make all of those steps correctly. This application hasn't even fulfilled any of those other than to present a narrative which asks this board to extract from inside it answers to the questions that the ordinance requires. There's no point having a wetlands conservation overlay district with requirements if we don't ask our applicants to meet those requirements in every case. In this case, the applicant has not met any of those requirements, in my opinion. He's presented a narrative which may answer some of the questions raised by the requirements of the ordinance, but not in the form required, and that to me is a problem, as it was in the preceding application.
Okay, thank you. Okay, but for this application, it is complete.
Well,
Is that correct?
yeah, I mean, I will agree with Mike that the format is different than what we typically receive.
Right.
Even comparing the narrative of the prior application, it specifically walks through the specific criteria in the ordinance. I agree with Mike. I think that this format does put the board in the position that it potentially has to extrapolate answers rather than clearly read them. I do think the wetland letter does provide a lot of insight on alternative location and minimizing degradation to the wetland, but it's not in the format that we typically see. I agree with that, Mike.
The ordinance calls for a particular format. There's absolutely no point having the ordinance calling for a format if we don't require it of our applicant.
Okay, but to answer my question, is the application complete so that,
That depends on what your review of completeness is.
Okay.
I really do believe that that's somewhat subjective in this case because the wetlands ordinance does state clear criteria. I believe those questions can be answered in a somewhat different manner, but I understand if members feel that's not the case.
okay. Planning board members, can I entertain a motion for accepting this application as complete? Is anyone willing to make that motion? I'll make the motion to accept the application as complete. Anyone willing to second it? Just trying to open the public hearing if someone wants to speak to the issue.
So your options, assuming that you're not going to rule this as complete, you have a couple, obviously. You can request the applicant come back in 2 weeks
Right.
to the group with a revised format to the letter, and I can make sure that I sit down with Dan this week and go over that. Or you can continue it for a month period if you feel that there are items that really need further review. But I think that based on format being the issue, a 2-week delay would be enough, would be adequate, if the board feels comfortable with that.
Okay,
Format and Mike's concerns about not having addressed all of the ordinance items.
Yeah, and as you've seen in my review, I do have some concerns about this and the other application. So I think that it definitely needs a little more time, and I think there are some clear completeness issues that should be addressed.
okay.
There are things in this letter and in the commentary that have been discussed, such as a water line and no additional pavement. I don't see a water line. It looks like there is some additional pavement. I'm not clear on how that and this help us make a decision.
Sure. So we'll make sure we address those on a revised plan, Vaughn.
Okay, so basically, we're saying that this application is not complete, so we can't open the public hearing. So why don't we try to be very clear so that we get what we need in 2 weeks, and we can continue this until whatever the date is. Let's see. Does anybody know what the date for the next meeting?
It's the 16th of April.
16th, thanks.
I would just recommend you check with the applicant whether they're available for the night of April,
I could be here.
April 16th.
16th, okay.
Yep.
Okay, okay, let's be very clear.
I don't see
Mike-
how much.
Mike has already been,
We have an ordinance which says do this, 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 and when you're
Okay.
done, you're done.
okay. All right, anything else people want?
If you have further concerns, please just let me know. I'm going to try
Well,
and sit
no,
down.
we should do it publicly, so.
Yeah, I'm just saying, if you suddenly come to something after the meeting, please just let me know. I'll try to sit down with Dan in the next couple days.
Anything else down here, folks?
I really don't like the location where it is, I'll be honest with you. I think
Okay,
it's tucked over there in the wetland, and I understand the handicap need. I'd like to see it be pushed out of that area a little bit more, to tell you the truth, and get away from the wetlands. Honestly.
Can I ask,
Okay.
Planner, on what basis did the ZBA grant the variance?
I'd be happy to pass along the minutes of the meeting as soon as they're available, Mike, but I don't want to, I'm not sure if I can give a good summary of the meeting. They felt that the 5 criteria were met.
Was a handicap allowance made as a result?
No, under statute it was not, if that's your question. Nope, that was not one of the justifications. It was certainly an argument made by the applicant, but it was not, the ZBA did not invoke that statute when reviewing the application. I'm assuming that's what you're asking, Mike, is that correct? Yeah.
Okay, Susan, Vaughn, either one of you have any additional things that you want considered? Okay, all right. I will not open the public hearing, but this item will be continued until April 16th, 7 o'clock. No new notices will be sent. Is that correct?
Yes, could you take a vote to that effect?
To continue this?
To continue to time and date certain?
Yeah, okay, would somebody? Okay.
Seconded.
Motion has been made and seconded to continue this application until April 16th. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, and thank you, Dan, but now I'm just going to read the next item into the record and ask for a motion to continue that. The following application is Sky Ridge Farm Condominium Association. This is on Farmhouse Lane. This is for a site plan review for the construction of the 2 garages, tax map 188-63, case 2019-08. Somebody be willing to make a motion to continue this application until April 16th?
Seconded.
Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, all right. See you in 2 weeks.
See you in a couple weeks.
Okay, next application, Robert Seifert. This is for a 3-lot subdivision. 55 Ferber Lane is the address on the application. Tax map 147-3, case 2019-09. Mr. Walker, or oh, okay. Start with me. Okay. Good evening.
Good evening. Most of you folks know me. I am Brian Berlend. I am a land surveyor, and I work for a company named Land Tech. This is a 3-lot subdivision of a parent parcel known as Tax Map 14, Lot 3. It has 50.44 acres of land with 706 and a half feet of frontage on Trotting Track Road. The proposal is to subdivide the parcel into 3 lots. The minimum lot standards in Wolfeboro are 2 acres per lot and 200 feet of road frontage. Of the 3 lots to be subdivided, Lot 1 will contain 22.7 acres and 300 feet of frontage being on Trotting Track Road, being well over the minimum standard. Lot 1 will also contain the Seaford Homestead. Lot 2 is the smallest lot, will contain 12.5 acres and 203.23 feet of frontage on Trotting Track Road, also being well above the minimum lot standards. Lastly, Lot 3 will contain 15.2 acres and 203.23 feet of frontage on Trotting Track Road, again above the minimum lot standard. Also know these lots sit near the top of Ferber Hill and enjoy wonderful views towards the south and west, overlooking Lake Wentworth, and Lot 3 has the benefit of also overlooking Lake Winnipesaukee too. The plan set is a 3-page set at 100 feet to an inch scale. Sheets 1 and 2 are recordable plats as they show the boundaries of the lands and the access easements. Sheet 3 shows wetlands, soils, and 2-foot contour topography, but frankly is way too busy to be recorded at the Registry of Deeds. My wife works there and she doesn't want anything that busy. Access to these lots is atypical in that the lots will use existing driveway easements rather than constructing individual driveways from their trotting track road frontage. The owner, Mr. Seifert, has 2 deeded easements to his property. Easement 1 is along a driveway and accesses off the trotting track road, runs across the land of Fraser onto his land. And there's language in that deed, or that easement language, that he can expand users on that driveway. The second easement Mr. Seifert has is across Ferber Lane. Ferber Lane is actually ends right here. It continues an easement through Kitzelmeyer and Gardena onto his land. Ferber Lane goes off this way, shown on sheet 2, to Beach Pond Road. The plan is that lots 1 and 3 will use the easement off a trotting track road. Lot 1 being the existing home, lot 3 being over here. From trotting track road, they'll take this driveway. Lot 3 will continue to lot 1 by easement, continue to lot 2 by easement onto this land. Lot 2 will be granted the Ferber Lane easement going to Beach Pond Road. We're also proposing reciprocal view easements, so all 3 lots have power and privileges to maintain their views to these lakes. And lastly, lots 2 and 3 will be provided utility easements, the final location of which will be determined by the owners and the municipal electric department. Please know that the electrical department's director, Barry Musio, met with us on the site and is agreeable to the final locations to be determined upon need. Also know that attorney Randy Walker, who is here with us, authored all the easement language. We're requesting 3 waivers of the subdivision regulations. Waiver 1 is 174-7D, being topographic contours. If you look at sheet 3, you'll see we did not do the entire 50 acres with topography. And we're only requesting a waiver to that portion of the lots that haven't been done. We have done 25 acres of topography rather than the full 50, and that acreage is up near the high points where the buildings will obviously go. Waiver number 2 is design standards as it applies to wetlands. Similar to the first waiver, we've only done 25 acres of wetlands mapping. The remainder of the lot has not been done. And also know that wetland scientist Peter Cooperdock did the wetlands work. And the last waiver is the source of soils information. We utilize the NRCS web soils data rather than a HIS mapping. And according to the NRCS web soils, the soil type is 67D, being a Paxton fine sandy loam, which per subdivision regulations requires 2 acres of land. We believe these waivers are acceptable and reasonable because the lots are so large. The smallest lot is 12.5 acres, where only 2 acres of buildable land is, or excuse me, only 2 acres is the minimum standard. per the municipal lot sizing, Lot 1 has 15.4 acres surveyed for wetlands and topography, where only 2 acres is the minimum size. Lot 2 has 4.6 acres surveyed for wetlands and topography, where again only 2 is required. And Lot 3 has 5 acres of mapping done, where only 2 again is required. And all that data is shown on sheet 3. Test pits have been dug on the 2 new lots. The 4K areas are shown on sheet 3. None of these lots need DES approval because they're greater than 5 acres. And we feel this application is complete and, quite frankly, are requesting a conditional approval this evening if possible.
Okay, thank you. Matt, would you like to?
Just one comment. I did speak with a few members before the meeting. I had received the legal documents late last week and had kept those for my own review over the weekend. Did not include those with the board packets, which I understand the board members may have wanted an opportunity to review those. Although it may not be acceptable to the board at this time, I have recommended that a review of those documents be done by town council at the expense of the applicant should there be any issues, because obviously the access to these lots is the critical issue at hand. There's no question about that. And I'd also just like to mention that the critical issue that really governs this application is the restriction to 3 lots per driveway. That's really what creates this situation and the need for these 2 access points. And would also just like to point out that the existing easement, what's sort of odd, or maybe not too odd, but the existing easement over the Fraser property actually contemplated the subdivision of the subject lot when it was created, and in that was actually included in the description of the easement, which I thought was somewhat interesting. However, they are formalizing the width of the easement to be the 30 feet that's shown on the plan, so there is some change happening there to some extent. With that, pending the 3 waiver requests that have been submitted by the applicant, I do find the application to be complete. I have a few other questions that are not related to completeness that I can bring up at a later time.
Okay, and the form factor, even though these are sort of unusual shaped lots, because of the size of the lots, they don't need to comply with the form factor. So, okay, the applicant has presented information about the waivers. It does seem that they're reasonable waivers and will not affect this application in any way.
Madam Chairman, I'd be happy to move the application.
Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded to grant the 3 requested waivers. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, with the granting of the waivers and all of the required documents have been submitted, it seems that this application is complete. If somebody would be willing to make a motion to that effect.
I'll move.
Thank you.
Seconded.
Motion has been made and seconded to accept the application as complete. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Oh, okay. 1 abstention. Okay, I now open the public hearing, so any member of the public that wants to ask a question, make a statement, or say anything about the application, come on up and tell us your name and... Okay. Okay, if you have any questions, we'd be glad to answer them. Oh, okay. Okay, can you come up to the podium and speak into the mic and tell us who you are? Yeah.
The mic may have died too, so.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Yes, hi, my name is Michael Kinselmeyer. I live at 59 Ferber Lane. So my question in this letter is in regards to driveway access. As you can see in its current format, and if you look on Google Maps, you can see actually possible up Ferber Lane, across my driveway, and our main driveway where we get home. I noticed that the plan, lot 2 is going to be the one that's going to be access across here. So my request is, as you can see, it's still possible for lot 1 to be able to come across my property. And I'm not comfortable with that because there's delivery vehicles that come by here, construction vehicles, so forth. I don't want them to be able to, if this is approved, I only want this lot here to gain access across here. I will enforce no trespassing for the other 2 lots. And so I really think in order to, for me to, as I stated in my letter, I don't really want to be the person who has to be policing up here. I think the reasonable thing to do is somehow break this access here. This access is only one. So that's, I think it would, you know, the cost to maintain Ferber Lane is currently falling on three residents, that of 55 Ferber Lane, 59, and 61. So, you know, we want to minimize the amount of cost to us. So it'd be a hardship to have to maintain it for an additional lot, and also the, you know, the additional traffic. I have little children, and the delivery vehicles as they are now already come up the road too fast. I'm always telling the FedEx guy or the UPS guy to slow down. The driveway to my home is within 50 feet of where these guys drive, so I think it's reasonable to, if you're going to approve this, like I said, is somehow this access has to be. Yeah. So as you can see here, it's possible to come up here, go through here, cross over here, go all the way down here. So my concern is, FedEx guy's already used to going here. Okay, when he wants to do deliveries, he's going to fly up here, he's going to go over there. So I don't want to be the guy who has to go out there and say, hey, trespassing, get out of here. So if this is going to be access, it's fine, FedEx can go up there, I don't have any problem with that. But for this one, I want no traffic across my property. You mentioned something about with that. Right here, that section has to go.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Michael Gardina, and I have the lot right next door. A couple things. One is, so we had spoken, Brian, early on about getting these to review. This is the first time seeing this document. So my first take of it is it looks okay, but I'd like to get a chance to have this document to soak it in for a couple days. So if this is approved, and I think it should be okay, I'd like it to be conditional. I'd like to be able to have, if I notice something upon a further investigation, I'd like to be able to just take a little time with it and take a look at the document. The driveway as it cuts through my property, Brian, do you remember how wide it is? Your driveway? Yeah, the driveway going down to Robert's Place now. I didn't see a width.
Do you have a scale?
I don't have much, actually. No, I do not.
No, sorry.
Sorry, Kathy. Scale this.
There is no defined width at the deeds of that
Exactly.
easement.
Right, right. And I just want to, and so what I want to make sure is you were doing as-built. And I just want to make sure that your as-built agrees with my as-built. And it looks okay to me, so I think we're all right. The other issue I have, I heard something about a view easement. And I don't know what that implies. I'm just wondering if that has any impact on my use of my property.
I'd ask the applicant to address it, but I don't expect that there would be any impact of the view easement on your property, Mr. Gardina, but I think the applicant should confirm that. We haven't seen the dimensions of the view easements, so I'm hesitant to answer the question.
They're not going to run across this property line, are they?
No, they're not, but I don't know what the extent of the view easements will be, so I don't know.
If anything, the view easement...
Come on up here, Brent. Okay,
I don't expect there to be any impact.
thank
but
you.
No, the view easement will allow the three owners to have privileges on the other lots to remove trees to enhance their views.
On
We cannot
the
remove any
lots of
trees.
the subdivision, of the proposed subdivision. Yeah, okay.
Will share between two contour lines the ability to cut trees and improve views. If anything, they should improve your views too.
Okay, that's good.
Okay.
I would like an opportunity to review those easements before I agree to them.
I'm sympathetic to Mr. Gardina's concerns, but the board should not be granting a conditional approval on an abutter's concerns. So if the board is sympathetic to Mr. Gardina's concern, I would recommend a continuance rather than a conditional approval.
Right.
How long ago was notice given, and could they have access plans in the office?
They could have accessed plans in the office. Notice was given in the appropriate time under statute. Yeah, I guess we could do a better job of informing people of the availability of plans. I think that's certainly the case.
Yeah, my notice didn't say anything about the plans being available and to come in.
Yep, nope, you're absolutely right. The notices do not say that plans are available in the planning office. They do not say that. It's something we could entertain in the future. They do say if you have any questions or concerns, contact the office, but that is a step that folks have to take, so we probably could make it more clear.
We've heard a prior presentation of this case, well, some months earlier. Not something that's brand new to public.
No, it's not, but the subdivision plans are pretty recently released, so I can certainly understand the abutters' concerns about not seeing the plans.
Well, I mean, the two things I'm concerned about tonight are brand new tonight, and that is the survey of the road and the documentation of that, the driveway, survey of the driveway, and the documentation of that, and then this is the first time I heard about view easements.
Okay.
Well, as Brian said, view easements are going to be cutting trees down on those three lots so that those three lots can enjoy the views that they want to have.
Okay.
They're not going to be cutting down trees on your lots. They're not going to be coming over to you to tell you to take your chimney down because it's in their way. I don't think you need to, and I'm not a lawyer, but I don't think you need necessarily to worry about the effect of the view easements on your property. They're not going to be physically doing anything to your property.
Okay, I understand what you're saying, and I understand that's the intent. I just want to see the document.
Well, that's different.
Okay, Matt, do we usually see view easements? And is that a requirement that?
It's not a requirement. The boards.
That be submitted?
It's certainly not a requirement that they be submitted. And please remember, if we were dealing with two properties in the public out anywhere in town right now, if one property owner wished to grant another a view easement, it would never come before this board for review.
Right.
That is not necessarily within the purview of the board. What I would say, though, is that our standards do require for easements to be delineated on plans. And for that reason, I think the board has a compelling interest in seeing delineation of it on the plan, but not necessarily to review the legality of the easement as part of the subdivision review process.
Has our attorney seen the easement dated 1991 in favor of Seifert over Ferber Lane?
Yes, our attorney has seen this easement as a part of a conversation that I had with Attorney Walker 9 months ago or so. Our attorney did review it. She did not review it in the specific context of this application, though, Mike, but she has reviewed the easement.
We have copies of two of the easements. We don't have a copy of the third, the easement over Ferber Lane in favor of Seifert. It's only referred to in one of these documents.
Yep, and one of the comments that I was going to ask Attorney Walker during the board's deliberation was to talk about how Seifert's rights that exist over Ferber Lane right now are being transferred and whether the documents actually provide for that. So I think that's a concern that I have too, Mike, but Attorney Spector Morgan has reviewed excuse me, some of the materials associated with the application.
If I may, Ferber Lane is a private way?
Yep, and in this case, the portion that's being discussed is more than that. It's or less than that, I guess. It's an easement driveway, essentially.
Okay, it's an easement to a driveway.
Yep.
It looks as if it ends in a cul-de-sac on the plan here, and then an easement continues through the cul-de-sac towards Lot 2.
Asked Mr. Berlin to address the cul-de-sac. I believe that's from a prior plan approval.
I'm not sure exactly. It looks like a roundabout bump out. Perhaps we need to have the applicant's attorney discuss these issues.
I got a question for the gentleman before he sits down.
Yeah, just a minute, sir. Come on.
So, pertaining to the road coming in, do you have some specific concerns about the road coming in?
No.
The width changing or
No,
something?
I just want to verify the new document against what I think the road is as well. I think it's a good representation, but I've only had 2 minutes to look at it.
So it would have to be officially noted for Seifert to have his driveway there initially, wouldn't he?
John, if you're asking whether he has the legal right now, the answer is yes, but I think we should ask Attorney Walker to give us an opinion on how exactly that right exists and how it will be transferred to the new property owner. Because I don't think that the abutters are arguing the right of Mr. Seifert today
Not at all.
to cross over the land, but I think we want to make sure that it's protected moving forward and can be transferred to a resulting lot from subdivision.
Right, for one house, for one property.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you. My name is Randy Walker. I work for Walker Varney here in Wolfeboro. I'm here representing the applicant. Let me just run through some of the questions that you've brought up and that the neighbors have brought up. From a historical perspective, in 1991, an easement was given by these two gentlemen's predecessor in title to Mr. Seifert. And I remember myself foreclosing on their property before they had houses on it when it was vacant land. I'm going to say in 1994-ish, just vacant land, but there was one improvement over their property, which is Mr. Seifert's driveway, because he got it in 1991. He built the road that goes over their property. He's been maintaining it for 20-plus years until about 2012. So when the two-lot subdivision that this board approved in 1996, on which their two lots are, it says on that plan, the planning board approved plan, that Mr. Seifert has a right-of-way over that. So it's already on a planning board approved plan. I have it here if you'd like to see it. The deeds that went out for lots 1 and 2 for Mr. Gardenia and Mr. Kinselmeyer's predecessors both say that they're subject to the Seifert easement. I have those deeds here this evening, and there's no dispute, I don't think, from either one of them that Mr. Seifert absolutely, unequivocally has a deeded right and has had it for in excess of some 20 years, has been using it in excess of 20 years. And being somewhat sensitive to these two neighbors, we only are trying to have one house go over Ferber Lane. When we came for a conceptual maybe 9 months ago, we were suggesting maybe 2 or even 3 over that. But to be clear, I drafted up a declaration of easements, 3 or 4 pages, very short, that says, currently, Mr. Seifert has one house that he goes over Ferber Lane and accesses that one house. If you approve this subdivision tonight, which we're asking you to do, there will only be one house that will continue to use that. That will be Lot 2. So only one home currently uses Ferber Lane now to get to the Seifert property. Post-subdivision, only one home is also going to continue to come over that. The other 2 are going to come up from Charting Track Road. And that's all in that, again, 3-page declaration, very straightforward, simple.
So that's the law, the history, and again, there'll be no increase of usage of Furbo Lane at all. One house now, one house later.
And Mr. Seifert will have a new address. It will no longer be 55.
Whatever the
Yes, yes.
post office
Yep,
does,
because-
perfectly fine, sure.
Yeah.
Lots 3 and 1 will not use Furbo Lane? Correct. And that's in the document, specifically Lot 2, and only Lot 2 gets to use Furbo Lane. Lots 1 and 3 will go down the hill and only go down the hill. We've been very precise, and again, it's only a 3 or 4 page document. We did deliver those last week to the town so that you could have a review of those.
That would answer Mr. Kinzelmeyer's concern.
It would. And again, and I'm saying, representing here in front of everybody, that is the deal. 1 and 3 will be deeded coming up from the bottom, not Lot 2. Lot 2 will be deeded from Furbo Lane, not Lot 1 and 3.
I understand that.
Yeah.
My concern really is, when there's a way, there's a will. People will go there because it's easier. But if it's not physically terminated, people will come up that way. You know, for instance, let's say...
Okay, Mr. Walker, you can have another opportunity. Go ahead, Mr. Walker.
So again, being sensitive to those needs, that's how it was structured and kept very simple. As far as the suggestion that we continue this hearing so that there could be a better review, and I've been doing this for maybe 35 years, and I don't think a board has ever continued on that ground.
I'm not suggesting we continue based on a butter review. I'm suggesting we continue if the board members are sensitive to the concerns raised by the abutters.
Fair enough on that point. As far as the view easement is concerned, it has no impact on any abutter's property. It's only a view by the existing, over the Seifert property, only the Seifert property, and if anything, it would benefit neighbors if they did decide to cut some trees. It's mentioned in my document, and I believe it's been shown here. I noticed the planner review had a suggestion that he review where it is, so they were trying to do it. It'll be on the plan, and it's, again, if they didn't do it at all, it would really have no impact on the subdivision. Whether they do it, again, it would have no impact on the subdivision. It just gives them the rights to preserve some of the existing.
And certainly no impact on neighboring property owners.
Zero impact. It's all located within the 50 acres that Mr. Seifert owns. The tree cutting would only be on Mr. Seifert's property. There's no impact on others, nor do they have any rights to cut on his property that we're aware of. Are there any other questions at the board?
Question of law. If Mr. Seifert has an easement to pass across Furbo Lane, does that easement survive the subdivision when ownership on 2 lots change?
Sure. I think that it does. I think that a legal argument can be made that all 3 lots could have a right-of-way over Furbo Lane. I think the case law has been going in that direction. But to be clear, we're not asking to do that. There's just one easement right now. The goal is to transfer that one easement to Lot 2. The declaration that you have before you does just that. The plan is to record that at the Registry of Deeds, contemporaneous with your plan. I didn't notice that was a condition of approval, by the way, and you should probably have those 2 documents that I had as a condition of approval being recorded so that the world is clear on that point.
So the question of law is not resolved finally. It is a debatable question whether an easement can survive a transfer or subdivision of a lot to the subsequent owners of the lot.
No, that law is very, very clear.
It is clear.
And you absolutely can transfer, and people do it all the time. We have probably 100 camp roads that go down to the lakes all over the place, and those easements are absolutely transferable every time a piece of property transfers. I think where it gets touchy is if you take a single easement and you subdivide a piece of property into 100 lots, can that one easement be funneled out? That would not be fair to the downstream people. But it absolutely can be transferred. The only question would be, can you do it to more than one? In this case, we're only doing it to one, so there's absolutely no legal issue in my opinion. None at all. We've been doing it for centuries like that.
Effectively, it works out that way. Okay, thank
Yep.
you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Walker?
I just have a comment. I'm reading, lots 1 through 7, and then now we have 1, 2, 3. It's rather confusing because we have no reference document here of the original subdivision. So when you go on about, maintenance and driveways and easements, we've got lots 1 through 7, and I guess lot 6 turns into lot 1, 2, 3. It's confusing to know which lot's which and where is the plan showing us where the original 7 are.
We had a conversation about this just today, actually. I'm not sure how you want to proceed, Randy.
So basically, there was Mr. Seifert and his partner, John Frazier, also his friend, they subdivided some lots along Trotting Track Road. They each took 2 big lots, about 50 acres each, lots 6 and 7 on a 1979 plan, I think, when they were approved. And they contemplated actually subdividing 6 or 7 down the road. And it's now coming to fruition some 30 years later, 40 years later, that they would do that. The lot numbering could have been better. I think I suggested at the conceptual hearing that we call this subdivision lot 6A, 6B, and 6C to delineate it, but as they say, there's many a slip between the cup and the lip, and it did not happen.
Or could you say former lot 6? Because it's really confusing when you're reading this.
I'm acutely aware of it, but I think that because of the plan references are there, that it's clear which lots you're referring to. And again,
Question for the planner. I know that this past TRC review, were there any comments or discussion regarding access by emergency vehicles, either Ferber Lane to Lot 2 or Tyler Brook to Lots 1 and 3?
Yes, there were discussions of both. Both Deputy Chief Zadi and Corey were there. I believe they've actually done a site visit to the lot. They both affirmed that they felt emergency access was not an issue. Specifically, Tom Zadi confirmed that the reality is, in the event of an emergency, the fire department is going to access a lot in the best way possible, regardless of what the deeded rights are in any case, to be quite honest with you. And Tom Zadi felt comfortable they would have access to the lots if necessary.
I'm concerned with Tyler Brook Way, or whatever it's to be called, is also to be used for logging.
Mm-hmm.
And we've already had experience on York Road with the difficulty of fire apparatus getting down to the end of it at one time, especially in mud season. Does Mr. Zadi feel no difficulties whatsoever with his vehicles getting access up to lots 1 and 3?
He didn't express any difficulties or any concerns about difficulties at the time, but I do think it's a good time to talk about the maintenance agreement that you've drafted up, Randy, because I think that protects the condition of the road moving forward as it shares the cost of maintaining and, frankly, responsibility of the condition of the road amongst the 3 property owners to gain access. That was one item that was mentioned by the TRC, specifically because we have so many private roads that do not have maintenance agreements right now across town. I believe that would protect the condition of the road for emergency access.
Yeah, it does, and this went through TRC, obviously, and both the fire and police departments signed off on it. Mr. Seifert built this road, and I believe the comments were that it was very well built, and it's been used for 20 years, and it's quite a nice road. We did draft, again, it's only a 3 or 4 page document that requires lots 1 and 3 to maintain that property, and if lot 7, the Frazier lot, should use it to also maintain that. Mr. Seifert, at the moment, pays for 100% of the cost of that maintenance, and that's going to continue until another house gets built on either lot 3 or on Mr. Frazier's lot. If that second house gets built, then they're going to share that 50-50. If a third house gets built, they're going to share it 33, 33, 33, all articulated in those 3 or 4 pages there to make it very clear that they not only have the obligation but the responsibility to maintain that road. And most banks, by the way, just as a side note, they're requiring road maintenance agreements for conditional loans. A lot of people that have homes on these older camp roads, which we have lots of in Wolfeboro, banks are denying mortgages on a very regular basis. Meredith Village does a good job approving them, with the bigger banks do not as much. Just a reference to you, and I think almost all subdivisions is maintenance agreements anyway. It's sort of standard at the legal level now to put it in any event, it's in this one.
One other thing I did want to note, I assign the E911 addresses within the community. We would, prior to a building permit being approved, assign an E911 address on either Trolley Track Road or Tyler Brook Way, however we proceed there. So these two lots would have addresses specifically off of Trotting Track, not off of Ferber Lane. That's just one other action we can take to address the concerns about access for construction materials. It's certainly not going to solve every problem, but we do preempt the building permit process with the E911 addressing.
Okay.
Can we require boulders or bollards or road removal on lot number 1?
The removal of that
Or
small
that
section of
driveway,
road.
yeah.
I think it's a reasonable condition the board could place in the application. Absolutely.
In theory, you could. We're not asking you to do that. We would not want that for a couple of reasons. Number one, Mr. Seifert may never sell off Lot 2, and he does go out both ways at the moment because he only has one house. At such time as he sells off Lot 3, he still can go both ways, and that may not occur for quite some time. So as the owner of all three, we would not want those blocked.
So just to be clear, these easement agreements would not be recorded until such time that the plans were required to be signed, correct?
We
Would
would
that condition be reasonable?
say that again.
So final approval of the plans would not occur until the easement documents are recorded at the registry. Therefore, if Mr. Seifert decides not to proceed with the subdivision approval, he simply won't record the easement documentation.
No, the plan would be, in a perfect world from our perspective, you approve this tonight.
Yep.
Tomorrow morning, you record that plan and my easement documents. We know that that won't occur that fast, but in theory, we're not trying to hold this back. If he would like to market these lots, as you know, we came in June, I think,
Okay.
for conceptual. We came back for a second conceptual. It's a 3-lot subdivision on 50 acres. It's pretty straightforward. We're asking for approval, but absolutely as a condition of approval, to record both the Tyler Brook agreement and the declaration of easement agreement with it. They should all go contemporaneous. That's the intent. And from a consumer perspective, if I were the buyer of lot 1, 2, or 3, I'd want all those documents to be recorded.
So could we make it a condition of pulling a building permit on lot 2 to sever the roadway?
Certainly could.
Yeah, so that doesn't continue in perpetuity? I mean, I would almost be tempted to ask for it with the recording of the rights that we're recording now. You know, it's a lot. It exists. It has certain rights. One has given up those rights once all of this is recorded.
I hear what you're saying. We're not in favor of it. That's the board's, preference. Obviously, you can suggest that. It's clearly being documented that that's the case. I'm actually just thinking from a fire perspective. If the fire department tried to get in, they came into the boulders. That would be the only issue there.
Yeah, I do have concerns about the placement of boulders for that reason.
I think we should leave this up to neighbors to work it out on the ground.
Yeah, just one question I do have, though, is if you record the documents and the plan tomorrow, would Mr. Seifert not then immediately lose access to his...
No, he owns lot 2.
Till sale.
He owns lot 1. He owns lot 3.
Okay.
He never sells them. Nothing changes. But
Sure,
the goal is to sell off
it's on
lots 2 and
conveyance.
3.
It's on conveyance, okay. Yep,
Yeah.
got it.
Okay,
The restriction is in the deeds, the easements that we have in front of us.
Yep.
And by continuing to cross over onto Ferber Lane, he's violating the agreement.
Correct.
So I think we should leave it there.
Okay.
I have a question for Randy on access for Lot 2 here.
He didn't hear what you said, Mike.
I'm sorry. If Mr. Seifert is going to give up his right of access to Ferber Lane from Lot 2 on the sale of Lot 2 by deed, then he's given it up. And there's a legal document which says he cannot exercise it any longer. I think requiring him to stick boulders in the ground or bollards or something like that is, in my opinion, punitive and unnecessary because there's a legal document saying he cannot any longer reverse that road.
yeah.
They got apps. They just plug it in. It says, come by my house. What am I going to do? I'm going to be able to stand up.
Okay, you need to come, if you're going to speak to us again, you need to come on up to the microphone. Mr. Walker, thank you.
Sorry, I'm not trying to be punitive. I'm concerned that, like I said, everybody has phones these days. Everybody does everything based on an app. They plug in the thing, and it's going to say, come up past my house. And, you think for the delivery guys at this new Lot 2, he's going to go all the way up Ferber Lane, drive down the trotting track, and come up the other way to deliver to the other house? No. He's going to go right next door, and he's going to drop it off, and that's the way he's going to do things. And then, these guys are constantly flying up past my house. And they're making deliveries to more than just one house. They're not abiding by any document where it's documented. They don't know. They're just going by what's on the phone, and I'm the one that has to live with it.
Thank you.
Maybe what you need to do, and I'm not saying what you should do, but maybe a call should be put in to the FedEx people that are coming to that next place and say, hey, no, that isn't my driveway anymore, and they could probably do something in-house. I mean, that's the only solution I could think of.
Okay, all right. Any other member of the public wanted to speak?
I had a question for Randy on Lot 2 access here. Randy, if I could ask you, Lot 2 access is going to be strictly for Ferber Lane, as I understand.
Correct.
Are they going to be restricted from going down Tyler Brook Way?
Yes.
The deed at all, just by deed and stuff, okay?
Yeah, the documents you have in front of you said that the only way they can get in and out, and the only easements that they have is over Ferber Lane to get in and out. They're not being deeded a right-of-way. And I'll use a 1986 example before this board when your predecessors approved Mountain West, a condominium development. It had 24 units that were approved, but it only had frontage for 22. And the developer was keen on having those extra 2 units because they were building fourplexes and they wanted 6, not 5, for the economic, model. And a board member said, how are you going to enforce? So I came up with a suggestion that we'll just have units 23 and 24 not be able to get down to the water because they didn't have enough waterfront. I think they had road frontage but not enough waterfront. And a board member said, how are you ever going to police that? The same concern, that you have here is we don't want to have to police it. But it's been self-policed for 30 years. The 2 owners that own units 23 and 24 at Mountain West know they can't go down to the water, they can't swim, they don't have a dock, and as a result, those units go for 100, 200,000 less than all the others because they're just backlots. So it just sort of self-polices, and again, to Mike Hodder's suggestion, the documents speak for themselves and people will enforce it.
Okay, thank you. Any other, Brad, did your question?
That pretty much answered it. My concern was that knowing that Tyler Brook Way can only service 3 lots, and being on Fraser's Lot 1 and Lot 3 add up to 3 there, I'd want to make sure that Lot 2 was being restricted from using that to meet our requirements.
Okay. Okay.
Just one final question, and I think this is probably for Mr. Berland. We have a steep slopes portion of our ordinance that deals with more than 20,000 square feet on a single lot being disturbed if it's over 15% grade. Is that an issue here based on your topo work on the site? And do you anticipate greater than 20,000 square feet cumulatively on any of the lots that would trigger that section of the ordinance?
20,000 square feet is a half acre. And disturbance to me is stumping, removing the topsoil. And
at a minimum, yep, absolutely,
yes.
Yep.
I don't see where these houses and their septic systems being quite disconnected would go over 20,000 square feet.
And is it over 15% for much of the portions of the lot that will be developed?
It averages 15%. There are areas that are over and areas that are under.
Okay, so it's something that we should pay attention to potentially when the building permits come in.
It would be a building permit issue, yes.
Thank you. Okay. Anything else? Or do you folks want to hear conditions that Matt has?
Actually, I have a
Okay.
question. We
Okay.
have draft easements and draft agreements, and they have notes in them?
Those are my notes. Please disregard my notes. We only received one copy of the documents, and again, I treated them as an original that I was going to review, so I apologize for that.
Okay, but these
And
are-
I stamped the draft on them myself,
All right.
so, sorry.
I have a problem with affected.
Mr. Walker and I spoke about the use of affected within the document. Do you have a resolution to that?
Our grammatical expert here, Matt, caught that we use the word affected and effected inconsistently on a paragraph, and the final version has been corrected to make them all affected with an A. So his input was most appreciative. Since this will be recorded at the registry, you want it to be right.
Got to get it right.
All right. Okay, so is it okay if Matt indicates his conditions that he's...
And I'm going to renumber the conditions as I have added one additional one in. But condition 1 is the incorporation of the plans as amended to the date of this approval. And those are the 3 sheets being presented to you tonight. Condition number 2 is the submission of a Mylar plan for recording at the Carroll County Registry of Deeds. Condition 3, the applicant shall be responsible for the payment of all recording fees. Condition 4, incorporation of the documentation submitted in the application. Condition 5, although it's recommended, I'd like to proceed with this as a condition, and that is favorable review of the final easement and maintenance documents completed by a town attorney. And I expect that would be a very brief review based on the length of the documents. Condition 6, the applicant shall provide a plan sheet indicating the general locations of the view easements to be favorably reviewed by the Director of Planning and Development. Condition 7, the applicant shall be responsible for the monumentation and the submission of a certificate of monumentation and updated plans, including original stamps and signatures from an LLS, CWS, and licensed septic designer. Condition 8, this is one I'm adding in here, and that is the recording of the declaration of easements and driveway maintenance agreement and Tyler Brook Way agreement. That's condition number 8 that I'm recommending. That would be recording at the Registry of Deeds. Condition 9, no access for lot 1 or 3, including materials and equipment for construction, shall be permitted on Ferber Lane. And condition 10, 2 no through traffic signs shall be installed on the entrances to Ferber Lane, to the Ferber Lane property and the proposed tri-track road easement, and added to the plan set with their locations. And that was a condition, or that was a recommendation made by the TRC that the applicant seemed to be favorable to.
Other conditions? And everybody is comfortable with the Mr. Seifert's driveway not being closed off?
Happy to move to approve, Madam Chairman. With waivers we already did.
10. Okay.
We've already approved.
Yeah, we approved the waivers, right.
I'd be happy to move to approve case number 2019-09, tax map lot 147-003 for subdivision with the conditions as stated by the planner.
Seconded.
And you seconded, okay. Okay, and the, again, the reason for Lot 2 going and using Ferber Lane is in order to comply with the subdivision regulations. So this is very specific and is going to need to be followed in the future. That lots 1 and 3 will be using the access to trotting track. Okay. Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, thank you all very much for your patience. Okay, the next item is a public hearing for site plan review regulations. The site plan regulations are titled Streetscaping, Buffering, and Landscaping Standards. These are regulations or an ordinance that was in the zoning ordinance, and during the deliberative session, well, not the deliberative voting day, we passed an amendment to remove the landscaping standards from the zoning ordinance and to put them into the site plan. So we think that this is a really good move. It'll offer the planning board a lot more flexibility in dealing with landscaping, and we'll end up with much better products. So go ahead, Matt.
Just a quick overview. I have reviewed this amendment with the board a few times prior, but I've actually codified it here and put some numbers to it and done two small modifications, which I'll review. But as Kathy said, we're taking the existing language from the zoning ordinance and moving it directly into the site plan review regulations under a new section to be titled Streetscaping, Buffering, and Landscaping Standards. And that would be 173.27.3. The two amendments that I've referenced, I'm just going to direct you to those quickly. The first one is on page 2 of your document that you have. It's a section I've crossed out, and that is the waiver standards section. The reason that I've removed that is by being in the site plan review regulations now, they're all portions of this are subject, could be potentially waived by the planning board, so there's no need to have that language in there anymore. And that's actually one of the big reasons why we've moved this.
The justification that's built into the waiver provision.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Yep, so any portion of this could potentially be waived as a result. The second amendment that I've made in here is really just editorial, and that is I removed a few, or just one editor's note on page 3. You'll see it under item D there on page 3. There's an editor's note. It's just not necessary, and I just took it out because I didn't feel it was critically important, and also it no longer would match the reference that was necessary within this section. So I removed that portion as well. Those are the only two amendments I have suggested.
And the appendix that was in the zoning ordinance will continue in the site plan.
Correct. And there actually is a third change I should just note, and that is on the following page, page 4. It's a very small change, about 3/4 of the way down the page. I removed a reference to 175-158D. That was no longer applicable, obviously, as we changed the location of the regulation now. With that, I think you're all familiar with the existing streetscaping, buffering, and landscaping standards. I think it's recognized by most folks that we should probably review these in some detail over the next year to either make improvements or make some adjustments or potentially just maybe shift our focus a little bit towards the importance of landscaping. But the first step is really to get them into the appropriate place in our regulations, so that's what we're trying to do tonight. This was appropriately noticed by the newspaper with the notice required under the RSAs. So a formal adoption by the board tonight would bring these directly into the site plan review regulations.
Okay. And John, it would be good if you could take a look at them at some point in time. There may be some things that should be changed in here. Okay, great.
Okay.
Great. Okay. Somebody want to make a motion to approve these addition of the streetscaping, buffering, and landscaping standards as 173-27.3 to the site plan regs?
Are we approving or adopting?
Would you like to open the public hearing?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay, yes, all right. Okay, well, I will open the public hearing. I apologize, but the room is empty, and but I will open the public hearing. Thank you. Thanks. Sorry. Okay, so I'll close, but go ahead with your question.
Was, are we voting to adopt or approve?
You're voting to adopt.
Adopt.
Yep, you're adopting that as part of the site plan review regulations.
I'd be happy to move that we adopt addition of streetscaping, buffering, and landscaping standards as 173-27.3.
Thank you. Okay, the motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. And the next section is a addition to the subdivision regulations, and this one really is clarification.
It is clarification. It's also, I think, a really good amendment to make. This has been reviewed with town council. And what we're clarifying here is that for purposes of subdivision, the road frontage that's required must be on a Class 5 road, a town road, or greater, or on a road built to a Class 5 standard. And this was sort of, it was implied within our regulations, and I think there's certainly, it was legal within our regulations, but the clear and plain language was not there. So we're adding in this language under number 4 in section E of the design standards, road access and construction regulations. All subdivisions shall have adequate provision for safe and suitable access to a Class 5 or better road, or shall make provisions for the construction of a road built to a current Class 5 or better road standard. This road shall be contiguous to a Class 5 or road built to a current Class 5 standard. That's to avoid the islanding that we have been concerned about. And said access shall be constructed pursuant to the most current Town of Wolfeboro road construction regulations adopted by the Wolfeboro Planning Board. So just clarifying a lot of what we already had in there, but making it very clear what our requirements are for frontage. We'd had a discussion, I think, as part of the Maplewood case, where what if a person only upgrades a portion of the road and there's a mile of Class 6 road or private road? That would not meet this regulation. I think that's in the best interest of the board to have it written this way.
So I have a question. If you have to have for subdivision 150 foot of frontage,
yes,
can you only upgrade the first 30 feet that gives you access to your lot, or do you have to upgrade the whole frontage?
If you have a lot that has 500 feet of frontage, but only 150 feet of it are a Class 5 road, and you're going to have the driveway come off of that portion, I think you meet the regulation. But if you're required to have 150 feet and you only upgrade 20 feet of it, you do not meet the road frontage standard. And you have 500, you would not meet the road frontage standard. You have to meet the minimum road frontage in Class 5 standard road.
150 feet.
Correct. Probably went a really long way in answering your question, Yvonne, sorry.
Any other questions? Okay, I'll open the public hearing. And then I will...
Is that a comment, Peter? You want to say something?
I'll close the public hearing. And if there's no additional comment, go ahead, Brad.
One thing, just reading through this, about halfway through on number 4 there, where you added in, which says this road shall be contiguous to a Class 5, a road built to the current Class 5 standard. Would we want to add the other word in there, or better, to that sentence also? Because we referenced it in, let's see, the first part of it, of having the access to a current Class 5 or better. And then it should be contiguous or built to Class 5 or better, just to give that option, in case it comes off of a, Class 4 or something like that, a state road or something that's improved a little bit more or something, so.
So, Brad, I know what you mean. Can you read how the sentence would be structured? Sorry, I just want to make sure I get it right, so.
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying, but. Basically, you want to say this road shall be contiguous to a Class 5 or better road, or road built to a current Class 5.
I think after that first Class 5 is where you'd want it.
Yep.
This road shall be contiguous to a Class 5 or better
road
built to the current Class 5 standard, which is fine. That part's fine.
Okay, so I'm going to read the new sentence. It's this road shall be contiguous to a Class 5 or better road, or to a road built to the current Class 5 standard.
Correct.
And does that cover it?
Yeah, that would do it.
Okay.
Okay, good. And that's just a clarification.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Did you get it, Kathy? Okay, if there are no comments or issues, then somebody want to make a motion to approve this subdivision regulation, 174-9E.
I would like to adopt.
Adopt, I'm sorry.
Clarification of Class 5 road requirement.
Okay.
Second that.
A motion has been made to adopt this provision and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Opposed? And one abstention.
Addition of or better is a substantive change. It is not a cosmetic or editorial change, in my opinion, so I can't vote for it. You're increasing the requirement.
Actually decreases it.
I don't think it has any material effect on the requirement.
Just makes it clear if it's on a higher class road, it's still.
If you're on a Class 2 highway,
It requires the road to be contiguous to a Class 5 or better road,
I don't think it's more restrictive than what's being
increasing the requirement.
I don't agree.
Doesn't matter.
Sorry.
Okay, all right, well, one abstention. Okay, all right. Okay, appointment of chair and vice chair. Somebody want to make a motion or a statement or?
Doing public comment?
No, I'm sorry, well, there's no public, so I skipped over that.
Oh, okay.
I'm into action items and the appointment of chair and vice chair.
All right, I'd be happy to stick with the winning team.
Wow, that's a weird.
You want me to do strict formal nominations? I'd be happy to
No,
nominate.
no, that's okay.
Now we're winning.
What is the winning team?
The one we have currently.
Are we winning?
We're winning.
Okay, well, that-
I think he's increased.
You argue with me about or better.
Just kidding.
Yeah, well,
I think you've substantively increased.
okay, so you're making a motion, is that right?
I move that we reappoint Kathy Barnard as chair of the planning board and Vaughn Dugan as vice chair of the planning
Okay, and would somebody,
I would just.
board. If either of them or
Well,
both of
and
them.
I would like to see if anybody else would like either of those
There's
jobs.
discussion following the motion. I think it's a second. Anybody care to second the motion?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Brad. Discussion. Anybody else want the jobs?
Yes. No, apparently.
I would just say that being the vice chair, and not that Vaughn's not done a great job, but being a vice chair is a good opportunity to sort of learn about the application review process and everything, and get your questions in early so we can get answers at the meeting. So if anyone's interested, maybe not this year, but in the future, if you're interested in being chair at any point, not to take away from Kathy, but it would be a good opportunity to learn.
right. Okay, so you ready for the question then? All in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, thank you. Thank you, folks. Okay. You know what I want to do? I want to get this master plan completed and the implementation committee in place. That's my specific goal. Okay, committee and subcommittee appointments. Well, we have our wayfinding sign committee.
There are 3 people on that currently, Peter, John, and Kathy.
Right. And
I know all want to be on it again.
and we enjoy each other's company so much that we
Well, not so much that the finish line is not very close, and, sorry. We can keep the committee going for years.
we're going to hang in there until we finish this task, John.
We're on a good roll right now.
Right, okay. Okay, TRC, I generally go to that, but if anyone actually is welcome. 9:30, first Wednesday of each month,
First and second.
first and second. But if anybody would like to do that, just let me know. And we're going to wait on the CIP because Your notice said April 11th or
For
something?
the members of the public, I had extended it to April 11th, so I figured we could just wait to appoint those.
Okay. Okay, so that's it as far as committees, except for the master plan committees, but I think they have to stay in place until we adopt a master plan. Okay.
When does TRC meet?
It's the first and second Wednesday of the month, and that's at 9:30 a.m.
9:30.
downstairs. Yeah, sorry, Kathy. Yep, downstairs. And the only thing I would say is if you're interested in attending those meetings, check in with me, because in some cases we don't have the meetings if there are no applications. And in other cases, if we have something we really want to get in front of the group, we will have a special TRC meeting. So if you want to be included in the emails, just let me know, and we'll get you on. We'll get you on there.
Okay, lot merger. Albert and Sandra Minotti, tax map 201-9 and 10. This is on Aspen Lane, which is in Port Waveland.
This is a merger of two substandard lots on Aspen Lane, one of which is occupied by a single-family dwelling unit. That particular lot is lot 201009. It's about 0.28 acres. And then lot 201010 is also 0.28 acres, but is vacant. We've seen a lot of comparable lot mergers recently. The resulting lot will not be fully conforming from an area perspective. It'll only be 0.56 acres, but it is closer to the minimum of 1 acre, and it does bring the lot into full conformity with the minimum road frontage for the residential district, which is 150 feet. So with that, I have no comments, and I would recommend the lot merger, unless there are any questions or concerns about its impact.
And last time, John, you made a comment about losing a lot of the smaller lots, which, people could presumably build smaller houses on that might be more affordable. In this particular case, this may not have been a buildable lot, was that?
Yeah, this lot is potentially constrained by wetlands and other soils issues, and it's obviously a small lot, so I think that John's concern is a good one. Obviously, there's also a tax impact of taking lots off of the tax rolls, if you will. But in some cases like this one, where the lot really isn't buildable, it prevents the planning board from seeing a very challenging, especially use permit review application or something comparable to that. So there are definitely good and bad lot mergers, I think.
So is Aspen Way a real road?
Ah.
Right. Sort of like Norma.
Do I need to answer that question to just no, it's a portion of it is a paper street, John. A portion of it is a paper street, but there was a court case many years ago involving the southern portion of Aspen Lane, and there are structures that are developed to the north of this. I think there are 2 or 3, but the portion all the way up from about, let's say, halfway up, there's no development on there because it's been ruled that that's a paper street and cannot be built upon without relief.
So this is at the bottom.
This is at the bottom. Yeah, this is at the very bottom. And I believe that, as you can see, lot 11 is not developed, but I believe the lots to the north are, and I'll tell you right now. The lots... Yeah, so the lot, if we look at this, the lot over here to the north, on the other side of the road, does have a single-family home on it. It's currently developed. Additionally, there's a lot beyond this, about 160 feet to the north on the opposite side of the road that is also developed. But then as you get beyond that, that's where you begin to see that there's no development opportunity. And what we've seen is that many of the lots on Port Wedland adjacent have actually been, the backside of where the Aspen Road lots are, or Aspen Lane lots are, the Port Wedland folks have actually purchased those lots and completed lot mergers so that they can essentially acquire all the property there. And that's because there's really no developability of those lots on the northern section of Aspen Lane.
Okay.
That answer your question? Okay.
Yeah, it's a private road.
It is a private road.
Right.
Yep.
So maintenance and so forth, I mean,
Yep.
now there's one lot and they don't divide it up between the extra lot in there. Do you see what I'm saying?
As far as like a maintenance agreement or,
You know, comes a question,
yeah.
how they take care of that.
That is a good question. I don't know if there's an existing maintenance agreement on Aspen Lane, but yeah, I don't believe it's the planning board's role, but it is a good question. I wonder if they'll be restructuring their maintenance agreement to reflect that more of the road is being fronted by these property owners, but at the same time, they've owned these two lots.
Yeah.
It shouldn't change their proportional contribution, but it's a good
That
question.
question's been asked in the years past when somebody else has merged a lot in another development, and now the rest of the owners don't get the money that they used to get for maintaining the road, and that's as if it was divided up between 10 and now there's only 9.
Yeah.
Becomes a question, and we've never said one way or the other what we do. We just let them deal with it.
Yeah, I don't think that, I always hate giving this answer, but I don't think it's the plan, I don't think the planning board can deny the lot merger for that reason, but I think it's something that the planning board should talk about it if the issue is raised, and encourage whatever maintenance association or agreement is in place to be revised to reflect that. Just encourage it. I mean, I don't think we can require it, but yeah, it's a good question.
Was there a butter notice on this?
No, we do not notice for voluntary mergers.
Okay, would somebody like to make a motion to approve this merger? Thank you. Motion has been made. Somebody want to second it?
Seconded.
Motion has been seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. The Spring Planning and Zoning Conference, you all have information.
Just informational, again, if you'd like to sign up, please let my office know. We'll sign you up free of charge. We do have registration monies in our budget, so just let me know if you're interested in attending. As I think I said last time, it's at a terrible time. It's Saturday, June 1st, so I won't be offended if you don't want to go, but it is a good conference for new members. It just, the scheduling never works out super well.
Okay.
I should point out, though, that all of the sessions are online after the fact in PDF format if you'd like to review what they talk about, but it's definitely more helpful to be there in person to listen.
Okay, discussion of Board of Selectmen alternate to the CIP committee. I was, this past year with CIP, there was an alternate for the CIP from the Board of Selectmen, and we told the alternate that they needed to be a member of the public, that we only have one member of the Board of Selectmen and the Budget Committee. And so that issue has come up again, I guess. I don't know, have you folks appointed committees, Ben?
We talked about it, and we haven't done any restructuring of anything yet, so.
Okay, well, apparently there's an alternate that has again been proposed, and I answered the question the same way, that the alternate certainly could come and ask questions as a member of the public, as we did last year. Is everybody okay with that? Okay, since we were pretty specific about wanting one member from each one.
There is the EDC, because this was mentioned, the EDC handles their alternates differently. I'm not suggesting that the planning board change the way they operate, but the EDC, for the Board of Selectmen alternate, they're allowed to participate as a fully deliberate, in all deliberations that come before the EDC, so you functionally have two members sitting with only one voting. So that's where some of the basis for the question came from. But
EDC is appointed by the Board of Selectmen.
That's correct. Yep. That's correct.
They can do whatever they want.
Yep.
If you have two members of the Board of Selectmen on the CIP, you even if only one of them can vote, both can participate in the debate, questioning presentations, presenters, and offer opinions and be persuasive, then you've increased the influence of the Board of Selectmen on a planning board by 100%, and then consequently watered down the planning board's influence on the CIP. Accordingly, you made it equal to the BOS's. CIP is supposed to be a planning board subcommittee designed for future planning.
Which is why we have 2 members.
Exactly. Yeah. And the Board of Selectmen is an executive body designed to put into account decisions that they come to. In addition, if you decide to appoint a selectman alternate CIP, you'll have to rewrite your rules of procedure and decide specifically what you want that alternate to be able to do and not do during the deliberations.
Okay, well, I thought that it worked out okay last year.
Yep. I did too.
Okay, all right, then it seems that you are all comfortable with what we have in place. The work plan, we're going to discuss that at our next meeting.
Yeah, we're going to discuss between 5 and 7 items are on the work plan at the next meeting. So we'll obviously have the condo association back as a public hearing, but I anticipate that the last hour or hour and a half of that session will be dedicated to kind of a roundtable about some work plan items, including the architectural standards, Cotton Mountain Historic District, potentially the filter bed road area, the implementation committee of the master plan. And Kathy, am I missing anything else? That's pretty well covered it.
Right.
So we'll have a pretty robust discussion agenda.
The new historic district.
Well, yeah, the Cotton Mountain Historic District, and I'll explain to you what's going on there at our next meeting as well. And you'll get a meeting.
We're trying to do something good there, but I have a feeling it's going to turn into...
It's not going to go well. It's not going to go well, but we're really trying to fix something that is a problem, so anyway.
But there is an item, and this probably is administrative, but I really... I mean, Mike was frustrated. I'm frustrated. I think everybody else is too about these special use applications. I mean, you know, we're trying to protect the wetlands, and we have specific standards with reasons, you know, things that people need to do. And maybe we just need to have 2 forms or something that we add, and I know that's an administrative thing.
No, it's okay. No, it's...
They have got to improve in order for us to do our job and not frustrate property owners and applicants and planning board members.
Yeah, and I think one thing that we may potentially do is, if you were to pick up our special use permit application or our site plan review application today, it's almost purely text of what the regulations are. And even for me, that doesn't really help me understand what I'm supposed to show on the plan and what specific items I should be addressing in my letter. I think we may need to go to a checklist format more than we have in the past, just to simplify it for applicants. But in appropriate places, make reference to the criteria that...
If they're going to intrude into the buffer and the setback areas, they need to tell us some good reasons why they want to do it.
Yeah,
and that's what the ordinance says.
And to some level, that's not even administrative. That's just applicant onus to complete the work. And I think one thing, at the risk of commenting on an application tonight, in one of the cases tonight, the applicant was sent a good example of what a wetlands report and letter looks like, and decided ultimately not to provide a comparable example to the board. So we can only do so much, and sometimes it is a board continuance that's necessary to move things in the right direction. And I'm sorry to say that, but it...
In the years I've been on the planning board, not as many as most people here, but in the years I've been on the planning board, the same faces at that podium time after time after time. These guys are professionals.
Yep.
They've been yelled at, I thought, before. They know what the rules are. They know how to play the game. And if they don't, they shouldn't be there. And I don't see any reason why we should make it easy for them with a little checklist they can cross off in colored pencils if they want to. Do they know what they're supposed to be doing?
No, Mike,
They shouldn't be there.
I agree with you. It would help me review the applications too. And frankly, it would help us tell them if they come in the door and there isn't something that's relatively minor in there, we can say it's just not complete and you're out the door.
The majority of special exception applications that we see have those requirements filled out in narrative form.
Right.
It's only a few that don't.
Right.
And they tend to be from the same,
Well, whether they are or whether they're not, the stopgap is you and your office. If you don't see it filled, you should tell the guy, sorry, Buster, it's gonna be continued if you're lucky.
so I guess this is a good conversation. So would you like me to take more of an active role in completeness before it even gets to the board? And just send away applications that are submitted at the deadline that are, I mean, part of the mechanical issue is that when we receive an application at 3:55 on the deadline date, I don't have time to review it that immediate instant, and the notices need to be produced within a period of a day. So we are working under some significant time constraint, and
Well, who's working at the time constraint? The applicant is the one who's, so they're the one who has to prove the onus has been satisfied.
Yeah, that's true. But what I'm hearing is that if you want me to be more of a completeness review, then within those first 24 hours, I need to either send them away or not. Because we do encourage people to come in weeks in advance and talk to us so that we can address all these issues. And I think that you see that in better applications, frankly. But when people do submit the last day and we have to notice the application within 2 days of that, it is really challenging for us to basically make a completeness recommendation on just a basic issue. So we can dedicate our efforts to it and try and improve it, but
I think a simple checklist would help that. Do you have this? Do you have this? No, you don't have that.
On your end.
Yeah.
On your end.
Would we be able to adjust the time frame? No, it's RSA requires, so many days notice before the meeting.
yeah.
For them to get this information to you as a deadline to be able to advertise to a certain date to give you more time on your end to review and make sure of completeness and stuff.
We can. I expect that there'll be significant resistance from the applicants to do that, or the agents to do that, but you could amend your procedures and require it 30 days in advance rather than the 21 that we're under right now, or the not even 21 that we're under right now. We could do that, but
I found in my experience, you extend the deadline and they'll take as much time as they can.
yeah.
So just I would say leave the deadline, but make everybody aware of the fact that if the application's incomplete, it's not going to come before the board.
Right, but to Brad's point, if the deadline were 30 rather than 21 days, it gives our internal process 9 extra days, where they still would have to have the application in on a date and time certain. It would give us extra time to review the applications. I don't know if we need to go there yet, though. I mean, I think if the board is just concerned about completeness in applications, we'll make sure that applications are complete, and we will literally just reject them. The only issue becomes if it will be an administrative appeal issue if they have a concern about our ruling of completeness at that point, and that's fine. We can just deal with that.
But it's so easy. I mean, our ordinance lays it right out, what they need to.
I agree with you, but
And I don't know, is there a way of sending a letter and using Jim Rhines I mean, he does a really good job.
I agree, and that's exactly what I did, to be quite honest with you, and the model was still not followed, so I don't.
And I think in addition, applicants should be advised that they don't present complicated documents to the board 5 minutes prior to the opening of the hearing.
Yep.
Yeah,
I had to abstain on the first case because
No, I totally understand, and
Vaughn is sitting here trying to calculate while all this chatter is going on. I mean, that really was unfair. We probably should have just continued, but I didn't really want to do that.
I would say that I don't think we need to take any vote to do this. If someone comes here and submits a document to you that wasn't available to us in advance, you should just say we're not going to accept it as part of the record. I don't see any issue. I don't know if that will really work mechanically, because I think sometimes you will want to see it if it's minor, but I think you can ultimately say this is too substantial for us to consider this evening. We're going to continue immediately.
Yeah,
I don't think there's any problem with doing that.
we need to be tougher.
You just need to tell the applicants that this is the way it is.
Oh, yeah. And we can do that. Again, I want to be clear, though, we are dealing with the exception and not the rule here generally. Generally, the applications are quite complete. We have the same issues with the same people over and over and over again.
And they'll either learn or they'll stop coming.
Yeah, and that's fine. It helps me hear this from you, because it's good to know.
We don't want it the day of it.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. I totally understand.
And, we're trying to accommodate these property owners who
Yeah.
just trying to get something
The
done.
gentleman stood up and said, I haven't seen it, give me some time to look at it.
Yeah, and I think I just sent an email to my staff about we're gonna include language on our notices in the future about materials being available for review. That's a no-brainer.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a no-brainer for us, so we'll make that change.
No, I always, when I was employed, always said to applicants, tell your neighbors what you're doing.
We do that.
Please, show them the plan,
And
it's a benefit to you.
the issue here, if you couldn't tell, is that the abutters had substantial concerns 6 months ago, and it went radio silent, I think, for a long, long period until they submitted these plans to us. So they were engaged, and then they were not re-engaged with, which apparently the applicant's agent had promised to do. So,
But you have to take the legal steps, because again, when somebody is doing a project and, yeah, there's neighbors, but you're not gonna, I mean, everybody isn't conforming their project to what the neighbors want. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Neighbors have a different angle, and a person doing the project has an angle of getting something accomplished.
yeah, no, I agree.
You have to cooperate with each other.
Yes.
Yeah. And sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, some agents are very good, as a policy of theirs, they make sure they knock on doors before they come to the planning board to avoid opposition, or at least to better understand what the concerns will be. Something we recommend to everybody. As we can see with some petition warrant articles within the past year, it just doesn't happen sometimes. And when it doesn't, it produces very negative results. Because even when there aren't substantive issues, just the fact that you don't know what's going on makes you immediately defensive to whatever is being proposed.
Mm-hmm.
So we definitely support it, we promote it, but if people don't do it, it's going to show up during the public hearings.
But I think you said it, if people know that it's been noticed, and with that notice, you can come see us.
Mm-hmm. And we get a lot of people who do that, but you guys were absolutely right. They were right. We don't offer it right up front. These folks, I feel kind of bad, because I had a lot of correspondence with them over the past week, and they hadn't really asked me to see the plans. I actually assumed they had been provided with them. So, yeah, it just neither of us really knew that the other didn't have all the information.
If the timeline is, okay, if the plans are due to us 3 days before we have our meeting, and those people would see those plans, us included.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So when they show up at the last minute, they can't see them, and we can't judge them properly.
Right, but so let's take this case that we're talking about. Those plans were received in my office 20 days ago. I mean, we've had those plans on record for a long, long time. I even, in this case, called one of those property owners, because they had called me 6 months ago and asked to be notified of when an application was in front of the board, and I took a note of it and I called them, which is not necessarily our normal practice, but they were definitely aware of this application coming before the board weeks in advance. And yeah, we just need to kind of open the line of communication, make it more clear that we have the resources that they need to look at.
Yeah, and that they can come in anytime from 8 until 4 o'clock.
Yeah.
And look at
Oh,
the
yeah,
file.
and 7 to 4, we're here,
Yeah.
so.
Okay, March 19th minutes. Anyone have any issues? We're good minutes?
Motion to approve.
Motion has been made and seconded to approve the minutes. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, and one abstention? Two abstentions? Okay. Thank you, folks. Until we meet again.